I didn't want the recording to go when we had 40 minutes of the break. But thank you very much for that. Okay. All right. So just as a quick recap then, thank you very much, Palesa, for offering that up. And those who are not here, we want to make it sure that you acknowledge the query and the fears that your colleague has, and lay them up front initially and say how you're going to explain where the rationale comes from of why it is the expected pension will be less. But that it will actually ultimately work in her favor, because now she gets a guarantee, which she didn't have previously. And then and the end, to actually draw the threads together. So what you're doing at the end is you are reiterating, but you might not have the word count to reiterate in exact detail as Palesa, as you did, because that could have ended up being quite a long paragraph, that one. But what you would like to say is just to touch on it and touch on the principle that in fact the fund is looking after the members by making sure that they have that guaranteed period. Okay. And when you speak about mortality and so on, be sure that the person who's asking you these questions will understand the terminology. So living longer, etc., is much better to say than to say light mortality, or whatever the case may be, whatever the thing really is. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for that, everyone. Very well done that you all managed to finish this. I'm not too sure if you have had attempted this question before, but now what you can do is you might want to give it a better shot and then look at the sample solution. Be aware that when you look at sample solutions, that they are just that. They're a potential solution, and you might have put in something else. Okay. How do you feel about having a break now of 5 minutes or so? Well, it's 11:17. So we'll have 8 minutes, okay? And we'll come back at 11:25, if that's okay with everybody. All right?
So,
questions?
yes.
There are more questions, yes, please.
Yes, I do have a question. So, so in closing, so if you have an email like this one, where the person is asking why the pension is not what they expect it to be, so would it be appropriate and really proper to, like in closing, to reassure them that the calculations are correct? I mean, like, so in the opening, of course, you will acknowledge their concern and make sure that they are comfortable, that you understand what they're trying to say, and then you go on with the body of the email and address all of these things, and then at the end you try maybe like to speak to that point, because maybe she might think that someone miscalculated, or they forgot to account for this or account for that. So in closing, would that also be a proper closing to say, rest assured that these calculations are correct and they have been reviewed, and they are as they are because of reasons I've highlighted?
Absolutely, but I would again say that that can form part of the reassurance in the beginning. So you would say, I know that the amount is less and does seem illogical, considering you were quoted more 4 years ago, but I can assure you that the calculations are correct, given that there's been a revision of these of the rules, which I'm going to explain to you now, and show you the impact of that. So you want to do that in the beginning, and at the end you can just, you don't always need to reiterate that it's accurate. You don't have to use the word accurate, or you don't have to say it in such a way that the person now feels that they're stupid. That's all. That's why I always say that you're acknowledging that it doesn't make sense. Of course, it's not going to make sense to someone who doesn't understand that the rules have changed in a particular way, and so therefore the funders had to make provision for that. They've had to make provision for the longer term. So, Itumeleng, you're quite right, but put it in the beginning in that way. At the end, you can affirm that yet again, but you don't have to make it a long one, a long thing. Okay.
So Billy,
Yes.
So for me, I was just worried that I echo what Itumeleng was saying in terms of actually confirming the numbers that you're seeing in there. But now the issue is that I usually have is, does it come off as hostile if you're going to say, so in my opening, I have a line that says, I've confirmed the values made in your benefit statement that you received at the beginning of this year, and those remain true. So I'm just worried that, am I coming off as hostile a bit? Because basically what I'm trying to do is confirm that the numbers that she has are correct, and show her how they're different from those from 4 years ago.
Okay, so just to jump in there, very nicely put that the numbers are true. Somehow we sort of like have this thing of accurate or correct, but true is really, it's nice. It's a lovely choice of word there. But it depends where you put it. You're not going to say right at the beginning that line. You're going to first say, acknowledge the query. Then you're going to say that the figures, I can appreciate that the figure might have come as a bit of a shock, right? Because this, is less than before. And then you're going to go into the fact that they are true, but it actually is going to work in her favor. So in the long run, and that is what retirement is about, really. But you're not going to tell her that. But retirement is about, keep maintaining your lifestyle for as long as you possibly can. And if it had been anything less than the 200 odd rand, it would have been quite a thing. And then of course you go into your topics. So Palesa, yes, I think that was very nice, but not the first line, not the opening line. Because if your opening line is, I confirm that the figures are correct, and then you refer to the fact, but I can appreciate that you are maybe upset about it. Rather say, I can appreciate that you may be upset about it. First, it does appear to be, I mean, it is less than you were quoted before, but I can assure you, blah, blah. You see what the organization of that information does to your tone. It alters the tone completely. So well brought up there too. It is Palesa number 2, right? Or Palesa number 1. We just have 2 Palesas today, which is great. Thank you.
I just have another question.
Yes.
So in the question, like the last bullet under the notes, they say ignore effects of taxation, right?
Yes.
So in situations like that, so I just wanna know, like, how do you decide if this is something that you could also make this person aware? Because at the back of their minds, they may think it is a tax issue. So do we also pass it through and say, oh, by the way, this has nothing to do with taxation, but these are the reasons? Or is that just for me to know and not consider tax at all in my answer?
Absolutely. The examiner has painted the world for you for this question. You can't go into the taxation because that opens up a whole another scenario, and there aren't enough, there's not enough word count for that. And the examiner has tasked you to ignore it. If you go into it, you won't lose. You may, in certain instances, you'd lose marks because because you've been told not to go there. Ignore. If there's a word, ignore. If there's a word, include. If there's a word, do not include. You follow it like this is the commandment. Because the examiner has, as I said, they've created this world with the notes that they've given you, and they do not want you to do something else. Even though and you really, I mean, it creates a lot of tension inside you because you want to speak about implications, other implications. But the examiner wants you to focus on what they have asked you to focus on. In that respect, it's an assessment. It's not the real world. However, you have got to be as real as you can with the information they've given you. Do you see? I'm so pleased you raised that, Itumeleng, because you're not required to say, if they say do not, if they had not mentioned tax, or if they'd not mentioned something else which you feel is important to say, if you have the word count, that's when you include it. Not at the end necessarily. You look at your whole piece that you finished and you still have some word count over, and you want to actually talk about something else that the examiner didn't mention, but they didn't say you should exclude it. There must be balance, okay, in your response always. So if there are 10 or 12 notes or whatever amount of notes there are, you're not going to sway the notes one way or the other. That's why I say saying that it's true and that you can acknowledge it can be misunderstood. That's important to say in the beginning, but you don't have to reiterate all the time, but you can also in the close just reaffirm that the figures are correct or whatever. So very good point there, Tumale. So I want to just ask then if there's anybody who would like to just say the topics that the paragraph, what would become their paragraph headings, or what would become their topics to be discussed. Is there anyone who, Mhleli, do you have anything there that you had? Did you get to that point where you were able to say what you were going to talk about? I'm presuming, Palesa, that what you did was, since your close was so carefully tabulated about all those things, that you actually dealt with all of those in sequence.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, I have.
Hi, Mhleli. Thank you, Palesa. Mhleli, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just have basically on a high level,
Yes.
the topics I would sort of cover. So the first one being just a brief explanation of annuities, how they calculated, just on a high level, not in detailed maths, but
Yes.
more or less to have an idea, because then I can, the subset or second heading would be how the interest rates affect the price of annuities. So basically just having a tabular number just showing the impact of a change in interest rates and how it sort of impacts already the price of an annuity that you receive on a monthly basis. Then another section I would sort of look at was just the new regulation to say, okay, listen, you've got guaranteed income for a minimum of 5 years, irrespective of whether you live within that period or you die. And it doesn't change the fact that it's guaranteed income. So that is a charge on its own. But I'm not going to go into the specific details of that charge because it would be overly complex for this individual to understand. Then lastly, I would just look at basically the amount, just to sort of give a high level in terms of life expectancy. So we also take that into consideration, how long you expected to live. It's not like you're going to be paid for 1 or 2 year, but even if you live another 50 years, it's income guaranteed for your whole of life. So those were just the topics I had in mind.
And also that there would be a guaranteed amount for those first 5 years, right? That
Yes.
would stay the same, and that's a huge benefit, really. So that's great. Thank you, Mhleli, for that. But what I want to say is, just as a principle, try and put the good news first, okay? And wherever there is, particularly in this case with the person who's being so concerned about things, wherever you can say why it is actually in the favor of, why it would be in the member's favor that this is an improvement. So you would choose language which indicates that, so that she doesn't just look at the figure as a finite figure. It comes at the back of it, there has been a lot of thought and so on going into it. So I would have just made your second point first as opposed to the other way around. I mean, sorry, obviously the annuity, you needed to explain that. I think that the notes also asked you to do so. So be mindful that you don't use go into long explanations. Okay, if you have to give an example, try and use the figures that they provide for you, or part of those figures, and also try not to make it become a dominant. And in this case, as you said rightfully, clearly, you did not want to spend too much time on that. So great, that is good. All right, everyone. Okay, okay, Jacob was out. I just wanted to admit him there, but now we're going to have a little break. So welcome back, Jacob, but we're going to have a little break. 5 minutes, is that okay? Because we're now at 11:30, a 5-minute break, bathroom break, whatever. And then, in fact, you can make it, let's make it 8, I did say that. So just before 22:12, we'll start again, and we're going to go over another question. We may not do the full 40 minutes on exercise on the second question. I will just tweak it slightly. But in any event, let's meet back here for by 22. No, 22, yes. Yeah, by 22:12. Okay. Any questions you can put in the chat, because I will be able to answer them. All right, everyone. See you in a minute or two.
Yes, so
Itumeleng, do you want to ask another question? Yes.
Yes, I just have a question in the meantime during the break.
That's fine.
Yeah. So so I like with the headings, right? The headings for the paragraphs that I did.
Yeah.
I find that, like, well, one of the challenges that I had with coming up with these things was the conflict between trying to explain what's going on and being careful not to try and educate this colleague of mine, because I think the notes mentioned there that, you know, my aim is not try to educate this person, but like answer their specific question and stop there, you know. So if you have like stuff like if you have a heading like, you know, try to explain what benefit quotations mean, and of course include those annuities, touch just a bit on how those quotations are set about, that would be classified as, you know, explaining, right? It would not be like educating this individual. Yeah.
It's the tone. It's the tone, and the only thing I can say is you all have experience of a textbook, and we're speaking. It's because you're speaking to an adult, and also we tend, if we have the expertise, to go straight to the crux of the matter and explain it very clinically. Or on the other hand, we will say things like, you must understand. Now that's really talking down to somebody. Do you see? And then please note would not be appropriate either. Do you see? So these are words that would signal that you are talking down to this person who's a colleague of yours, or over explaining it. And now you see what we do next is, you know what I mean? So I think that it's a choice of words that you need to be careful about. And also, as they said, they didn't want it to be over explained, or over, yeah, forget the exact wording, but you mentioned that. Does that help?
Yes, it does, because I was thinking now, like, you know, both teaching and explaining involve explaining. You know, you're explaining something, basically, if that makes sense. So I was kind of like caught in between, like being able to differentiate, like, when am I, you know, teaching this person, or when am I really just explaining what they need to know and just not overdoing things. But because it's gonna take getting used to, but thanks for that.
It is going to take some getting used to, actually, and that's why we do the writing exercise. So I don't have the technical person here right today, because the emphasis was going to be on you actually getting started. So really starting the engine, turning it, letting it roll, so that you know it's good. So Samanga also asked the question about whether there should be annuities. Would it have been beneficial to briefly explain DC funds, defined contribution funds, that the benefit is not guaranteed on retirement, that it would be affected by expectations on how long members will live and the cost of annuities. So this, so the thing is that all you have to do is you have to make sure that you are following what the examiner has asked you to do. Things may have changed because this was 2014, right? And we have had some changes to pension rules and so on. So they are. Just correct me. Is this a defined contribution fund, or is it a defined benefit? Or is it a defined contribution? So what you need to say is why it was very important for you to write the topics, okay, the paragraph headings, is because what I do when I respond to a question is I take the notes and I take and the actual context that's given to us, you know, the sort of scenario. I take main points from there and I make them my paragraph headings. They might not end up being lots of paragraph headings, but initially I use it because I must speak to those points. So you might say, as you may know, or as you are probably aware, would be better than to say, to point to the person to say, you know that that this is whatever type of fund is, and according to the rules, this is what it must be. So it's the tone, the words that you choose in this context. If the examiner has asked you to provide a brief explanation of the type of fund, then you must do it. If they have not asked you explicitly to do it, but it would help you to explain the logic of why things, or the rationale of why things are the way they are, then you would say it. But you wouldn't say, as this is a defined contribution fund, blah, 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 you know it means, or what have you. Not in such a way as to, you know, sometimes we just, as in conversation, if we know a concept, we just state what it is, and the other people in the conversation are not aware of what it is. And we've used this very exotic word to identify it, but they're out of the conversation now because they don't know what that is. So that is where you would be careful. I don't want to dwell too much on the technical side because we have 3 workshops which are going to address technical issues, and this principle that you're speaking about now, both Itumeleng and Smanga, and also clearly you mentioned it, although you have written the exam before, so but that, and so have you, Itu, I believe. So we can raise that again there.
Well, I have a question as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you please elaborate more on just getting the tone right, and just like the whole thing about the tone of the text? Just yeah.
Yeah. So in this conversation, right, in this email, tone was very important. You weren't it would not be appropriate to simply refer to the rules, for example, and give cite them to your colleague. You don't want to do that. You would actually you would speak to the colleague in a warmer way by, as I said, the most important thing in that first paragraph is to allay their fears and their concerns, and to say that you are going to address why it is lower, but that it is correct, okay, and that it is as a result of the following things, and you can name those, and then in the sequence that you've named them, you put it into your body of your email. If you don't do that, and you just say, I've received your query and I'm going to give you the answer here. It's to do with the change in the rules. Firstly, and then you go into it. That is just far too clinical. Do you understand? So that would not be on here. Even if you were speaking, if you explained exceptionally well, you would have lost the opportunity to warm yourself to this person and to treat this person as an individual, not just as a number, a statistic, as a member of the fund. So Jacob, that's in this question, that is where tone comes in. And then at the end, to draw the threads together. So we will talk about that with in every workshop. We'll talk about tone, and it will eventually penetrate for you. You know, currently you probably don't get corrected on any emails that you write, and so that is probably why maybe you don't have as much experience as you would like. And also we speak on emails, if there's already an email thread, we tend to get quite loose with our language. Palesa, you have a finger, your hand raised, yes?
Yes, Billy. I think I also had missed the picking up that I needed a warm tone in this exercise. And I'm just wondering, where do you pick up that, a warm tone was more relevant? Is it because of the role of this, the assumed role that it's HR? Or is it because we're discussing pensions? I'm not.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, it's because, okay, I think there might have been a word already. But imagine unless it's a very good point that you raise. Everyone, you need to consider your audience and the purpose of what you write, why you're writing. So this audience is a 59 now, right? She's a 59-year-old person. So retirement is not very far away. And money means she hasn't got a lot of time to still accumulate more funds, etc. And she is worried. So you need to pick up that that this person needs to be dealt with carefully. In fact, take it as a given that everybody anybody that you get as part of your audience, there will be something that you have to tread carefully. You have to be in tune to. Perhaps you can go search in that question for any word that gives you any part of the scenario that leads you to believe that your tone needs to be careful with this person, or at least you need to tell them not to worry too much, or that, I mean, you're not going to go, oh, you don't need to worry, this is all fine, I mean, it's not that extreme, but yeah. So it's part of experience of going through lots of question papers and also doing them and then seeing what the examiner also wanted you to do. Okay, it's now 11:43. Did you have a break, or you feel that you're ready to go on for the next one? Did people have a break? Okay, I'm not going to. You're okay. Okay, are you okay to go on? Okay.
I am. Thanks.
Great. Thanks to Timoleng. It's working online in a workshop like this. You can't see people's faces that will indicate, oh, I'm bored to death, or I'm actually very interested. So I'm just assuming that everybody's very interested, because that makes me feel a lot better in terms of, and also trading off that energy. Okay. So we now have a second question. And in this question, yes.
Sorry, just one last question, just to follow up on what I think Palesa asked just now.
Yeah.
So with the tone, right? Just out of curiosity, like on the extreme case scenario, under what circumstances would a clinical tone be required? When will it be proper?
Okay. It's never proper to be too clinical. It is always proper to be accurate, though. So you can give accurate information, but the way in which you give it will either make it warm or clinical. So accuracy, or let me just say, giving the information that has been required, is always important. You can say the opening and close of your correspondence should always be in alignment. So I think it was a useful thing that Vanessa mentioned, for example, at the close, that it was true or what have you, that the figures were correct. And then at the beginning, also, it aligns with the beginning of allaying the fears. Then in the middle, when you're giving an explanation, you don't have to be soft and warm and fuzzy. You're just giving the explanation. So there, it's fine. But you won't then say, and please note, or what have you. But you may sometimes want to say, you may note that. Okay, that softens it a little bit. So that's where the English language is demanding, because it can come across, if you're too abrupt. Shorter sentences are normally abrupt, but you use a shorter sentence sometimes for impact. So it might come after an explanation, and then there's a shorter sentence which says something to the effect of, and that is what is, and that is what is the risk, and that is the risk. Full stop. You know what I mean? Then that's short and to the point, therefore, for effect. But let us continue, and we will come up against more of these about being clinical. So clinical is when you haven't acknowledged the person's position at all. I mean, if the person, you know, is so far, I mean, so close to retirement, you would need to have picked that up. Okay, so I'm glad that you raised that. This is how attentive you need to be to the script. Does that help, Itumeleng?
Yes, Billy, it does help. Thank you so much.
Good. Okay, so now we are going to go to the next question. Please bring it up on your, next to you on your screens. Or maybe you've got it, you can toggle between these two screens. Okay, so we don't have time to do everything in this one. But this is an interesting question, because you notice it's got nothing to do directly with actuarial science, but it has everything to do with risk, and it has everything to do with one's responsibility as a professional with the skills to understand risk for society. So that is important. Now, in this particular question, you are writing to your chairperson, and the opening paragraph, we call it unsolicited, because you've got to make it attractive for this person to continue reading. So bear that in mind. And what I've said here about planning topics to be covered, let's not dwell too much on that. I want you to read the whole document. It's a lot of information. And let us do the opening and let us do the close. But I'm just thinking now, if we go to, we won't be able to do the topics to be covered, although it is definitely part of your planning. So we're not going to do that necessarily, the sequence of the paragraph headings. I just want you to note everything that needs to be mentioned. Okay, and maybe 3 sections that you would cover. You could actually put 3 main sections Not all the topics to be covered, because a lot of the topics will go into one of those. It's a cluster. So you recall that, you know, sets basically. So you design for yourself these sets and what information would go in there. So this is high level, just 3 sets or clusters of information. And in this response, you see that it's actually a long letter. You're given a lot of word count. But since we are working with opening and closing a lot, those are the 2 that you need to write. Okay? So I've said here, read through the question, plan the following, the opening paragraph. Here under topics to be covered, it is important for you to have at least 3 sections, right? And your close. Because in your opening, you would also say to the person what you are going to be doing. It's a roadmap for the actual letter. And then your close. And this tone is going to be different again. So I would imagine you would read it for at least 10 minutes. You would plan for 15. And then you would write those 2 sections, the opening and the close, in the balance of that time. Okay, so another 40 minutes. Okay, so that takes us to 12:30. And I have one more exercise, but it's not going to be as grueling. Off you go then. I will mute myself. Sorry, I'm going to quickly grab something to drink, so I'll be 5 minutes, and then, but put anything in the chat if you have a question, and I'll let you know when I'm back.